Welcome to the Leadership in Law podcast with host Marilyn Jenkins. Cut through the noise, get actionable insights and inspiring stories delivered straight to your ears. Your ultimate podcast for navigating the ever-changing world of law firm ownership. In each episode, we dive deep into the critical topics that matter most to you, from unlocking explosive growth to building a thriving team. We connect you with successful firm leaders and industry experts who share their proven strategies and hard-won wisdom. So, whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting your journey as a law firm owner, the Leadership in Law podcast is here to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to build a successful and fulfilling legal practice.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership in Law podcast. I'm your host, Marilyn Jenkins. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Traci Austin, to the show today. Traci is a transformational leadership strategist and the founder and chief talent officer of Elevated Talent Consulting. With over 20 years of HR leadership experience, she specializes in helping construction and skilled trades businesses build high-performing teams and develop the next generation of trade leaders. Traci partners with business owners, project managers, and field leaders to tackle the toughest workforce challenges, equipping them with the tools to lead with confidence, retain top talent, and create workplaces where people want to stay. And as the host of the People's Strategy podcast, Traci delivers no fluff, real-world leadership insights tailored to the trades. A sought-after speaker and advisor, she provides practical strategies that work on the job site, not just in theory. Whether teaching foremen how to handle tough conversations or helping business owners shape a winning culture, Traci is the go-to expert for companies that want to elevate their leadership and build a future-proof workforce. I'm excited to have you here, Traci. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation. Tell us a bit about your leadership journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my journey, I think like several of ours, there's several stops in it. And, that journey was 10 years in nonprofit organizations. I got my nursing home administrator license. Was playing in nursing homes for a while. I do have clients that do run small law offices. And so, that really brings in that depth and breadth, and what's so interesting about that journey is it really comes down to communication and connecting with the folks that are in front of us.
Exactly. And I understand, you do want to specialize in a certain niche. That's great. But what you're talking about is if you can get the people on the job site to communicate and become better leaders and a better workforce, the office is absolutely something you can handle. So I'm excited to talk a bit about that. So you do work with law firms and other people, but you do the marketing towards the trades.
Correct. Yep, absolutely.
Excellent. So I'm not one to micromanage. Hate it. I want to hire an A player, make sure they do their job, and I don't have to follow up on them all the time, right? So how do you inspire a team to work harder without micromanaging?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this comes down to who are the people that we're working with. And so one of the tools we use is a tool called Predictive Index. I don't care what tool you use, but really getting to know who your people are. We all have different behavioral styles, and I can't lead you the way that I need to be led. I need to lead you the way you need to be led. And so really understanding who the people are that we're working with will tell us how they need to be led. And what I hear you say is, I don't like micromanaging people, right? And I don't either. We have a joke amongst my team, which is, Traci, you give us, something to do and you think you have like all this clarity in it. There's a Grand Canyon sized gap between what your vision is and what the steps are to get there. And I go, yeah, I'm the visionary, right? Much like you are.
Yes.
And so, the key here within this is really understanding what your people need. And for me, a lot of times I have somebody in between who can see the vision, but that can also translate that to folks that need the step by step. And so that knowing who's on your team and having that match to the job that they are doing.
Excellent. Yeah, we took the step of, after thinking about it for a while and letting it seem like an overwhelming task, we did SOPs for everything. And it was as simple as recording each task. Your brain goes, oh, that's a huge hill to climb, but it's really not because you do this all the time. So that's been helpful for my visionary to say, okay, we did that as a video. So go watch that video and you know what I want.
Yeah, for sure. I love the mindset you just brought forward, right? Like the mindset was this is a huge task. And in reality, we're just creating the videos of what we're doing. And that key part of leadership is what are our thoughts about things, right? And
Yeah.
same with our employees, who we're working with is what are those thoughts? Because so often it's this doom and gloom, everything's, awful, bad, not working well. And it's like, is it really?
Yeah.
Let's
I mean,
get the facts around it.
they say that they know how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. You can't look at a project as being all of that. If you take the time to, even like journaling, using it as a journaling prompt, what are the steps to make this happen? One thing I'm struggling with right now is I've got a fabulous A player that is so excited with a task, especially, but they deliver so quickly, there's mistakes. But they want to get it delivered. Look how good, look how, and you're like, okay, I need to just take a breath. So I'm kind of working with that and almost probably 50% of projects. Now they're relatively new, higher. It's exciting to see them developing, but they're wanting to deliver so quickly. But I mean, how would you handle something like that?
Yeah, and so it's looking at and saying, there are kind of two pieces to this. They're seeing that there's a deadline and it has to be hit by the deadline, but yet there's, it's like the quantity and quality piece, right? There's a quality to this that we also have to hit. So in that situation, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll break down that project into smaller projects. Because typically projects build, right? Like you need one piece of it before you get to the next and the next. And, I think an example I'll bring in is when I was working with a number of these law firms, one of the things that, they were really frustrated on is things not getting done well, but also the conversations and the customer service that needed to happen with the clients. And so we really defined what that customer service was. So we defined the project, then we defined the key pieces of the project. And that customer service had to go back down into the granular detail of what are we pulling in for the information at the front end. So let's say that this is a divorce attorney and, we have to do all of our discovery up front. What information is that person giving out up front? And let's break that down. Let's ensure that we've got that process and let's try it on 2 or 3 clients. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. Then they're getting the feedback that they're doing the things well right away. And we can know that that's done before we go to the next stage. Otherwise, let's just hit a deadline and do it as quick as possible. Well, we missed steps 2 through 8.
Yeah.
12, 17, and 22, and I know you got to 40, but now we have to go back and redo everything because those key pieces were really important in getting to the end.
No, that's interesting because it's delivering creative. So there are always steps in it. So that makes a lot of sense. I will work on that because I'm excited about their motivation and their creativity. It's just, okay, the deadline is Friday, right? You don't have to deliver on Tuesday just to say, look how fast I did it.
Right. And I would get curious there and wonder, okay, like, is there other things that they don't necessarily know what they're doing? Or are they really passionate about this and they're a type of person that needs to do one project, complete it, do the next project, complete it? And that's where really getting to know what they are and what their personality styles, whereas you and I think we've got 10 projects going at once, so we can add 4 more to it. And we're good with that, right?
Right.
Not everyone works that way. So understanding what that is and almost giving permission into that process as to what do you need? And here's what I need. And here's where we can have some of those conversations because it may be some unblocking to ensure we're not missing those key pieces, especially as creatives when they're first learning you and your brand and all the things about it. There's a lot.
Yes, true. That is true. And they bring so much more to the table as far as, I can tell them what I envision they make it happen. So I appreciate each member of my team. And speaking of that, and going back to how you like to be led, did you encourage any assessments, like personality assessments before, or if you're just now approaching this, maybe having your team each do one, and so you have more grasp of what you're working with?
Yeah, I would highly recommend doing assessments. Like I said, we use Predictive Index in our firm. There's ones you can use for hire and ones you can't. Predictive Index you can use for hire, Colby you can use for hire, DISC you cannot, right?
Right.
And so, the key here is you're matching it to the job to be done, and then you're also using it through the organization. And so based on your size and needs, would bring up a different recommendation from me, but, like I said, PI is the one that I use, and there's definitely others as well.
At least you have an idea of how someone likes to be led, what makes them, because I know that your system works on 4 keys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking job fit, team fit, manager fit, and culture fit. Now that a lot of that would come from the assessment. Is that correct?
Yeah. So some of that does definitely come from the assessment, and I say yes and, right?
Yes.
We pull from the assessment, and there's other pieces to it. And there's actually a 5th one that I throw in there, and I'll talk about that one in just a second. But job fit, so fit to role, if we think about that, it's like 2 sides of a same coin, right? Like we don't want something from one country and something from another country. It's not going to fit, right? And so it would be like putting me into a role that is an accounting role that's very, very detail oriented. It has very strict deadlines. There's a lot of kind of data pieces and fact finding background that you need in order to do that. Whereas that wouldn't work for me at all, right? Like it would be a horrible fit.
Same here.
Right. But yet I did payroll for 7 years. And it's like, well, how could you do payroll, but yet that's not your personality, right? Well, I did it because I was in a season of life. This is, driver number 5. I was in a season of life where I was climbing that ladder, right? And I knew for the role that I wanted to be in, I had to have that skill set. But I knew I didn't have to do it forever. And so with that being said, it is important to kind of look at those key pieces, especially for somebody that's growing in their role, that may be in a role temporarily that isn't ultimately aligned, but we know where they're going. So that motivation is there to drive it pretty hard. And so, yeah.
So
that's the role.
So I like that thought process. So you're getting someone in the, like, there's things, and my assistant has helped me so much with this. There's some things that you don't want to do or you don't enjoy doing. And there's someone in this world that enjoys doing.
Yes.
So it's, when she sees things on my calendar that she could do, she is the first one to say, you shouldn't be doing that. Right. So that's been a lot of I think the seat fit, being able to, get those things off your plate is, how do you help? I mean, what kind of assistance or advice would you give someone to make sure to be able to see that you have the right butts in the right seats?
Yeah, so there's a couple key pieces there. One is, I do highly recommend doing assessment that compares the job to the person, because you're just going to be able to see so many items and just have much better conversations. You will also now have a grounding so that you can have some of those coaching conversations when you need it. The second piece around kind of, the right person, the right role is really clarity around the outcomes, not so much around the how. We talked about, we don't love micromanaging, but the clarity around the outcomes and what does winning actually look like, so that we can ensure that we're all moving towards that kind of right outcome. And that's a key piece of that. Of course, we have the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, they need to show that they can do that or that they can learn it quickly based on where they're at.
And do you encourage finding out what are your goals? What does winning look like to you? I mean, how do you look at it? It's not really future pacing. It's just knowing what you're working with and what are they happy? I mean, how do you keep tabs on something like that? Is that something that you can advise on?
So one of my favorite questions is, what is a work bucket list item for this year? Because it can really tell you what they're interested in. I just had a conversation with all the team members of a client, and that was one of the key questions I always ask in every stay interview on an annual basis. It's something that I do for a number of clients. And, hey, what is that work bucket list for this year? And she's like,
I love
I
that.
really want to get into event planning, and I really want to expand the administrative work that I'm doing truly into some of the event plannings for one of the conferences that we're doing. I said, okay, awesome. And then I said, what's a personal bucket list item that you have? And she's like, I've been to X number of states, and I really want to go to a warm weather state. I want to do X, Y, Z. And I go, aren't you guys holding a conference in San Diego? She's like, yeah. And I go, are you going? She's like, I don't know. I go, well, why didn't you, why don't you ask about that? So some of those questions are, hey, how can we start to build some of those things together? We are the same pot of soup at home and at work, right?
Right.
And what are those things that drive us? And for your leaders listening in, what are those things that drive your employees? And there's ways to kind of incentivize, like, hey, let's have her come to this conference. It expands what she's doing, and it will actually help her do her job better because she'll have a better understanding, a cross training of what coworkers are doing that will support her, especially in some of the billing and other things that she is doing from the accounting side. And so, there's times that we really can reward some of that great work with things that allow an individual to grow and allow the organization to expand. And again, does that individual have to have a great performance ahead of time? Of course, right? Like those things are absolutely there.
I love that. What's your work bucket list and personal bucket list? I've never thought about asking that. That's very good. All right. And we do from time to time have team members that are either not working out or something's come up and we have to have a hard conversation, whether that's to put them into training or, whatever you call a write-up or whatever. How do we do that? Have those hard conversations without losing respect?
Absolutely. So we've got something called our tough talk audit, right?
Okay.
But before you walk into that tough conversation, really get the facts. What are the key facts of the situation? And I will tell you that this is where leaders get so hung up because we tend to wrap stories around facts and make it very different than what it actually is, right? So what are the facts that are specifically happening? And I'll throw my HR hat on and my compliance hat on and say, we need to have documentation, right? So when you're pulling those facts together, now you have the documentation. Because the question that's going to come is, did you train them? Did they know what was expected? How did they know what was expected? It's like, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So how do we ensure that these things are in writing? Guess what? We do it by signing the job description. We do it by having the employee set their goals on a quarterly basis. So, hey, what are your 3 work goals for this quarter? Of course, tied to the job description. And you have the ability then to shift those goals a little bit, especially if they don't align with what the organization is working on. Now we've got in writing what their goals are. And again, we need to make sure we write our goals so we actually know if it's done or not.
Yes, that's sure.
So now we've got our goals. So now we're going to sit down and we're going to have the conversation. And guess what? You can have this conversation even if you don't have those things written down because we're going to start getting it in writing. And so, we're going to walk into that conversation with an intention. That's step 1. Step 1, what is your intention, right? So that intention is, we're looking to bring awareness to the performance to hit X, Y, Z. And with that, we want to, the intention is to support that individual through it. So that's our intention, right? We're going to set the tone of the conversation so that that individual feels heard within it. And then we're going to, ask some questions and name the facts. We're going to really listen into what is underneath that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set some mutual goals. And so what can we mutually agree upon? And once we've determined what we can mutually agree upon, we set what will be done by when. So often we miss this by when.
Right.
What must be done by when. And then once that's done, I start where we'll send the email to begin with, but we get to the point where the employees start sending the email. So it's an email follow-up from the conversation. We met today about blah, blah, blah. Here's the 3 things I committed to do for you. by when, and typically they're already done. Like I will just attach them in the email that I send. And here's the 3 things you agreed to by when, please, let me know if you heard anything different in this conversation. Here's why that question is so important. 1, we want a response back in the email. When they respond back in the email, it's kind of like that signature where it says, yeah, we had the conversation. They don't have to agree with it. We just need some form of communication showing that they had the conversation. And then it gives them the opportunity to really tell us what that is or what that isn't. So.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to do a role play real quick? Would that be helpful
Sure.
for your listeners?
Sure.
All right. So do you want to be the employee, and you'll have to tell me what we're coaching at?
Okay. Let's think about this. I'll be the employee and I'll be a customer service rep.
Okay. And what's the problem?
I am not organizing the client's files appropriately on a consistent basis, and all clients have the same files.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, Marilyn, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, of course.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how are things going?
I mean, great.
Okay. What's really great about the work right now?
I think talking with the clients is nice, and the team is good to work with. I'm just excited to get new clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 100% agree with you on really learning what our clients need. And it's something that you excel at. And as we're getting new clients, there's several that are coming in. And I do want to talk about that process with you today, about that client paperwork that comes in and how we're organizing it to ensure that each of the attorneys in our firm has the right information and consistent information, especially because there's times where I have to jump in for Sarah or Sarah has to jump in for Jean, so we do just want to ensure that client information is always consistent. Can you tell me a little bit about what's working or not working within that right now?
I think it's the order in which they come in. That's the way I've been delivering them, and I know that's different for each client.
Okay. So you're delivering them based on the order that they come in. And I know we've kind of had this conversation before around priority based on when, the court dates or the discovery dates are, that we need to prioritize them versus based on when they come in.
So I'm just thinking that it might be easier if we did a checklist, a generic checklist, since everybody has the same needs, have the same requirements. But so getting them out of order is a problem, I'm assuming, for the team. So
yeah, and I agree with the checklist. And as we're such a small team and growing, we're finding the things that work and that work for you. So would you be willing to come up with a checklist that you could provide back to me maybe by noon tomorrow?
Sure.
Okay. What are some other things going on with that?
I think it's just the timing. I feel like some clients are taking way too long to get us what we need, and then which makes me feel that I'm not getting them to the correct attorney or team member at the right time, or that's why I'm giving them what I have, as opposed to giving them an envelope or a folder.
Yep. And let me ask this question. What do you think the impact is on giving the attorneys what you have versus all the documents together?
Well, I guess I never thought about it. It's probably wasting more of their time. They're having to pick it up 2 or 3 times instead of once.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it sounds like there's 2 problems. The first problem that we have is, what do we focus on first, which we're going to take care of with a checklist. And then it sounds like the second problem is we're not getting the information back timely from the client. How do you think we could solve that?
Well, it's a balance. It's like, how do we remind them without hounding them? But this is also professional. They know we need this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would like you to come up with different ways to remind folks where they still feel honored and they still feel that they're a part of the process versus that they did something wrong.
Okay.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah, and we don't typically have the personal conversations at work, but I'm just going to share kind of a piece of story. Is when I went through my divorce, my attorney did reach out a couple different times to say, "Hey, do you have this piece or that piece?" And sometimes it was, quite honestly, I was so overwhelmed, I just couldn't do anything. And those reminders really were almost godsends to me because it told me what I needed when, and I didn't have to try to remember anything.
Mm.
So, for
And see, I
me,
just think of it as being negative. I feel like they're going to feel like we're
yeah,
pushing them, and yeah,
yeah. Well, you are, right?
yeah,
Because we want to meet what the goal is, but it's in the languaging of how we make those reminders so that we can hit their goals and our
nice.
goals as well.
I love this. This did take the issue and it actually broke it down 3 levels to figure out what's really the problem.
Yeah. So
Because
now we're out of our role play.
yeah. I mean, I just see as you're going through and okay, I see the things, the checklist would be great, but yeah, it's like, I think we're all in a position where we have clients that if they're taking too long to get us something, it is uncomfortable to have that third phone call or fourth email going, hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got some
Absolutely.
clients that get on board in like 2 days, and then I've had every now and then you'll have one that takes 6 weeks. And you're like,
100%. 100%. So there's two things that might be helpful for your listeners here. And one of those is we actually put timeframes on some of the contract pieces, meaning, hey, we will, so we're starting to set up our contracts in order to impact that so that it doesn't come back as, oh, this is an issue on the firm. It is, here's the amount of time that this should take in order to do it. And, we do require, turnaround of documentation within X period of time. And if we don't have that, we will send reminders for that. But, we can't perform all of the work until those key items are complete. And so we're setting expectations right up front with our clients, just like we're setting expectations right up front with our employees. And we call that designed accountability in all the leadership programs we run. Design the accountability so that, we can move things forward in the process.
I love that. Yeah. I think even on my onboarding, I only have the time frame on like the form, and it would be better to have the time frame of, yeah, interesting. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here. This has been a really great conversation. It's just, I love the way you bring it up and how to work with your team. And, we all, are working for a common goal. And I think you find out really quickly if someone's not, and you try to get rid of them. As they say, hire slow and fire fast.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I like. But I appreciate you being here. And I know that my listeners might want to reach out to you to talk with you about some of these issues. And maybe, I noticed that you have some courses and your podcast, of course. So there's a lot of different ways that you can help them. What would be the best way that my listeners can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We have something called our Tough Talk audit. And so happy, and that's kind of those 6 steps I walked through. But then we have a blueprint, which includes the email template follow-up. So if you're interested in learning more, I'd suggest that Tough Talk audit.
That's fantastic. And I've got elevatedtalentconsulting.com and your other links to reach out to you on LinkedIn or Instagram. So I'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes and of course your YouTube channel. So I'm excited to get this has been great. I really appreciate you being here. And I think we covered a lot of stuff. And I thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do 2 things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, you can connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take the next step with a digital strategist to help you grow your law firm, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to lawmarketingzone.com to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, thanks for listening to Leadership in Law Podcast, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Leadership in Law Podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of law firm owners out there facing similar challenges and striving for the same success. Head over to our website at lawmarketingzone.com. From there, connect with other listeners, access valuable resources, and stay up to date on the latest episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep leading with vision and keep growing your firm.